Greetings from a chilly and blustery day here in Pennsylvania. You can probably make out the wind a little bit on the microphone. Yeah, today is December 1st and it's starting to feel like it. Not terribly cold, but that wind is... I'm here at Memorial Lake State Park, and that wind off the lake is kind of brutal at the moment, but it'll get worse as winter progresses. But anyway, I'm just here at Memorial Lake. I'm not here to really hike at the park. I'm here to talk about a new series that I'm planning on working on. I think I mentioned this earlier several months ago about doing a series on the French and Indian War here in Pennsylvania. And it's a good place to kind of give an intro for it. But it is chilly. Here's a bit of a look at where I'm walking. Out there is Memorial Lake. Up there is the Blue Mountain. Up there is a gap in the mountains called Indiantown Gap. And further on is the Swatara Gap. And if you go this way, back that way is the Monada Gap. And why am I telling you all about those gaps in the mountain? Because they were an important part of the French and Indian War here in Pennsylvania. Back in the 1700s, the 1750s, when Pennsylvania was still just a colony of Great Britain or of England, this mountain up here was the frontier, the Blue Mountain. On this side of the mountain where we're standing was part of the colony of Pennsylvania, and on the other side it was Indian territory. I guess you could say it was a bit contested territory. A lot of the Indians still lived on that side, but the French claimed that's part of Pennsylvania, and the British kind of claimed it as well. There was no clear boundary. And you have to understand too that in the 1750s, western Pennsylvania wasn't part of Pennsylvania. It was actually claimed by the French. It was part of New France, and I think Virginia, the colony of Virginia, also claimed it as well, I believe. So it wasn't really considered Pennsylvania at that time, although it is now. So that's kind of where the war started, out there in western PA. It was a colonial conflict between two European powers, the British and the French, over control of that disputed territory. Kind of west of the Appalachians, but east of the Mississippi. And of course, the war went from 1754 to 1763, and it erupted here in the colonies, and then after a while, it spread to a worldwide war between the French and the British, and had greater consequences for both. It's also known as the 7 Years' War on a larger scale, from 1756 to 1763, when it kind of erupted on a more, like I said, larger scale. All right, it is chilly out here. But as we walk, we warm up a little bit too. Of course, up through the trees, you can see that gap in the mountain again. Like I said, those gaps were important. Pennsylvania was not well prepared for the French and Indian War. Pennsylvania was founded by the Quakers. William Penn was a Quaker. They were generally, pacifists, so we didn't really have a standing militia of sorts prior to that time, but of course things changed during the war. I think Governor Morris was in charge at the time, and they quickly set up a whole series of forts along this mountain chain, primarily at the gaps. Like I said, that way was Monada Gap. There was Fort Monada, and this area is called Fort Indiantown Gap because of that reason. There was a fort there. Like I said, Swatara Gap had a fort called Fort Swatara as well. So because the Native Americans, many of the Native Americans sided with the French, and they would use these gaps as a way to do raids on the territories south of that mountain there. And of course, I just mentioned the Native Americans in those raids. The Native Americans kind of got caught in the middle. Many sided with the French, some sided with the English. That's why it's called the French and Indian War, because those were the two opponents of the colony, of the British colonists at the time, were the French and the Indians. Although some French did side with the English, most sided with the French. And there were reasons for that. I guess the French were more interested in just the resources of the land. The English colonists were more interested in, taking control of the land and farming it and stuff. So the Indians were losing more, in a sense, to the English and they were to the French, so they kind of sided with the French. And there were other reasons as well. So those gaps, like I said, offered an easy access into this area down here. A number of Indian raids occurred at that time, different massacres and stuff. And that's all part of the history of this area. Because I grew up next to, right near Fort Henry, which was also a fort at that time. I think I shared that in a previous video when I did the Tobahawken Path, talk about Fort Henry. And there's numerous stories in the area where I grew up about the Indian raids and things like that. There are other forts as well that weren't necessarily forts. In a recent video I showed you Light's Fort in Lebanon. In my ancestors, there's a house called Fort Zeller from that time as well. But both those houses were not forts per se. They were built before the French and Indian War, but they ended up getting used kind of like as houses of refuge during the war. When the Native Americans would raid this area, the people would find shelter in those houses, and they kind of became known as forts. So Fort Zeller, Light's Fort. Sometimes they're called blockade houses as well, but they were not built by the militia as forts. They were just current residences that were used, during the time of war. Of course, once again, up there is the gap in the mountains. Can you imagine living back then during those times? Would have been kind of a dangerous place to live. I should say too, there were some colonists who lived on the other side of the mountain as well. But during that war, during the French and Indian War, they got mostly wiped out or had to flee their homes. Might be chilly out here, but kind of beautiful as well. Looking out there across the lake. So during the war, Pennsylvania kind of kicked it into high gear and building up a militia and getting these forts built to kind of protect the settlers in these areas. And like I said, those chain of forts extended largely along the Blue Mountain from down near Franklin County all the way up to the Delaware Water Gap. I do have a map in the Jeep, but it's kind of blustery out today, so that probably won't work so well. But in the future, when I do these videos, I'll have a map and show you more in detail where I am. All right, but in these series of videos, I'm going to show you as much as I can of what's left from that time period, where the forts were. Of course, this is 275 years ago, so a lot of the infrastructure from that time is not around anymore. There are a few places, like Light's Fort and Fort Zeller are still around. The helicopter. Turn you off for a moment. Yeah, that's from the military base. As I was saying, I kind of forgot what I was saying there for a moment, but I'm going to try and take you to as many sites as I can. Like I said, a lot of these sites, there isn't a whole lot to see. A lot of them are on private property as well, so I won't be able to take you to the exact spot some of these forts, but I can show you where they were. Sometimes there's just a marker there for them. There are places that you can visit that there's still buildings there. There's a ton of stories to tell about what happened during that time, different Indian raids and some battles and stuff. So I'll try to share as much as I can with you from that time, as much as we can see. So I'll break this up in a whole different series of videos. I might do them like county by county, or try to do something like that. We'll see. And I think I'm going to start in the Harrisburg area, near the state capitol, and work my way east to the Delaware Water Gap first, and then go back to the Harrisburg area and work my way west into more central Pennsylvania. At least that's the plan. I'm kind of looking forward to this. I've been wanting to do this series for a while. I kind of forgot about it. Kind of got sidetracked because of the whole thing last spring with the shutdown and stuff, but hopefully we'll get back on track. So I am looking forward to this series. I know a lot about the history of the war in my area where I grew up, but I'm also excited to learn more about it in other areas as well. I should say too, if you have any stories or history of that you want to share from your particular area, go ahead. Put some comments below, or you have some links you want to share with me. Because a lot of people, from your home area, you tend to know stories and history and stuff like that. So if you want to share some stuff with me that I can use in my videos, go ahead and comment down below. Ooh, and here's another quick view of the lake. You can see the wind just pushing those little waves on shore. Okay, wow, it's getting breezy out here. All right, so I'm gonna head back to the Jeep, get back inside Naomi. It's warmer in there. I have some mail I want to share today too, but I think I'm gonna share that inside the Jeep. Turn the heat on maybe. A little bit too chilly out here. So like I said, I just want to quick make this video to let you know that I'm going to be starting that series here soon. And of course it'll be mixed in with my other videos. But I'm hoping to get a lot of it done this winter as well. Alright. Let's get back to the Jeep. Thanks for coming along, and I'll see you around, especially in these, like I said, I'm looking forward to this series, so I'll see you around. Thanks.